Well, hello with Gratitude Matt listeners. My name is Bill Moran, and I'm Matt's older brother. And today I will be your host for our With Gratitude Matt show. Matt's goal with this show is to inspire more people to practice gratitude on a regular basis. As you know, Matt passed away this past August. Matt confronted adversity and illness and let it be a catalyst for his life, which was deep in gratitude, love, and faith. Please know that Matt and his wife, Mary, their girls, and the entire Moran family appreciate all your love, prayers, support, and generosity. We are so grateful and blessed to be a part of such a supporting, caring, and loving community. I'm humbled and honored today to be here with our guest, Ellen Duncan. Welcome, Ellen.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. The story of Ellen is really a love story of Ellen and Paul Duncan. They met in September of 2009 while students at Notre Dame. Paul, a 2009 grad, was taking graduate classes in the fall of 2009 and was also the starting offensive tackle for the Fighting Irish football team. And Ellen was just beginning her junior year at Notre Dame. Their relationship started as a friendship and blossomed into so much more after Ellen returned from her semester abroad in London the spring of 2010. Ellen earned her a degree in 2011, and a year later, they married. They are blessed with two amazing daughters, Dylan and Sloan. Paul established himself as an industry leader in construction management with the Walsh Group in Atlanta, and in 2020, Ellen founded Pineapple Partners, a strategic marketing and growth consultancy business. Then God's plan for the Duncans changed. Suddenly, Paul was called to his heavenly home on July 16th, 2022. With the support of her family, her friends, and her deep Catholic faith, Ellen decided to share her experiences of grief, hope, love, and faith with others. Ellen, thank you for being here today. Before we get into a lot of what you are sharing with others, I'd like to kind of get to know you and let the listeners get to know you. So kind of why don't you just walk us through where you grew up and kind of your family and all those kinds of
Sure, I'm
beautiful
happy
things.
to. And really glad to be part of this message. I had the chance to interact a little bit with Matt just over, social media and email before he passed. So glad to be able to join today. So I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is where I now am back for all the sort of chapters that life has unfolded, especially in the last year and a half for us. So grew up outside Philadelphia, actually lived abroad growing up. We lived in London, and am from a very vast and deep Notre Dame family. Both my parents went to Notre Dame Law School. I think I have, if I look in some file, 27 aunts, uncles, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-grandparents there. So a lot of deep Notre Dame history. I always joke that I fulfilled the dream by marrying a Notre Dame football player, which I always laugh at. But my daughter Dylan, actually, so Father Patrick Dylan is an ancestor of ours. So lots of Notre Dame history there. But grew up in Pennsylvania, went to Notre Dame undergrad. And then Paul and I lived in Chicago for a few years. And then Atlanta for 10 years. I have three brothers, two of whom are also Notre Dame grads, and they live in the D.C., Philadelphia areas. So just sort of been a whirlwind, obviously, for the last year and a half. But as you talked about there, and I'm sure we'll talk about more, just sort of the foundation of everything that came before has been helpful for us to be able to continue going forward.
Right. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I'm glad that you're back with family in the Philly area. One of the things that I found really touching was when you spoke at Paul's funeral, and we're going to bounce around a little bit, but what you spoke of was how you were introduced. And that's just a charming story. Please share that with the
one of
listeners.
My favorites. So my beautiful mother-in-law, Julie Duncan, was Paul's parents were wonderful supporters of him in general, obviously, and in his football career. And so they attended, I think, every single Notre Dame football game while he was a player. And So on September 5th of 2009 was the first Notre Dame home game of that season. And some girlfriends and I were at CJ's Pub, the old CJ's, if those that know, not the new one. And let's say there's a couple different versions of the story of long or short, but one of my best friends, bridesmaid in her wedding, best friend remaining today, she pointed out Paul. Paul at the time had long hair. He was probably over 300 pounds. I was 6'7", and she said that guy looks like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, who's the sort of, is a villain, but it was a big guy, good-looking guy. And we sort of laughed, moved on, and then fast forward several hours in the night, I wanted to go home and trying to find someone to take a cab with. And this woman tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sweetie, you are so cute." And I said, "Oh, thank you." Thought she was going to try to ask me to move or something. And she said, "Would you meet my son?" And I was like, "That's an interesting question." And I said, "Well, who is he?" And she pointed and it was Gaston. And so I said, "Oh my gosh, Erica will think this is hilarious if I meet Gaston." And so the rest is sort of history from there. And
That's great. So at what point did you ever share with him that you had nicknamed him Gaston?
We sort of fell for each other very fast. And so by a few weeks into our relationship, I was like, "I guess I have to stop calling you Gaston to all my friends that actually refer to you as Paul."
Oh gosh, that's great. How did he take that?
We loved it. It was always a funny story. The girls still definitely is a story we tell a lot. So even probably about a year ago, I played sort of an avid tennis player, especially in our Atlanta chapter. And one of my tennis partners gave me a little Gaston figurine to carry around in our tennis bag. So still lives on.
That's beautiful. Well, I hope that still is in your tennis bag.
Yes.
So then you studied abroad in London, second semester of 2009. And were you dating, or what happened?
We were sort of when I look back at it now and, at, I guess almost 36, you still feel like have all this wisdom now. But so I was 21 at the time when we met, and I went abroad. Yeah, so we started dating, and then Paul was, like I said, a non-degree seeking grad student, which was a funny term for him when they showed his title on TV, but he had graduated. And then at that point, the coaching philosophy at Notre Dame was to not have fifth years pursue graduate degrees. And so Paul then went into sort of the journey of exploring professional football. And so that spring, so sort of January of 2010, I went to London. He was training. And I dated, Zoomed. I guess Zoom did exist at that point. And it was a whirlwind. Like I said, I got back in May of 2010 from London, and we got engaged. So when I think back to it, I think it all, I obviously no regrets on any of it, and we were able to have all the time together, but people were shocked because I was engaged before my senior year of college. So sort of not completely atypical for Notre Dame, but now when I, meet a 21-year-old, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was that young.
Wow. So then a fairy tale wedding in April of 2012.
Yep.
And so then shortly thereafter, the family comes, and with the birth of your first daughter, Dylan. When was Dylan born?
In August of 2015. So we lived in Chicago for a few years, and then Paul got an opportunity with the Walsh Group, Archer Western, which is a Notre Dame company, to work on a project in Atlanta. And so he grew up in the broader Atlanta area. I worked for Accenture at the time. And so we just sort of said, let's try the move, be closer to the Duncan side for a few years. And then we ended up staying. Both girls were born in Atlanta. Sloan was born in 2017. I ended up transitioning from Accenture to the Coca-Cola company and spent close to 7 years working for Coca-Cola, and really, just established some great roots in Atlanta.
And at that point in time, what was life like for the four of you?
Really, truly beautiful. It's one of the things that makes it so hard, but so great. I mean, grateful for everything that happened. Is I would talk a lot about the sort of just few days, even right before Paul fell, where the night before we were at our favorite restaurant, had a picture of margaritas. The girls are having a great time. The morning of, just in our groove. And we really, had found a great, in our groove, I guess best way to say it's, so in 2022, Sloan was 4 and Dylan was 6. And they we were just in a great place. We had moved into a new home in 2018, had great neighborhood, great, things were good.
So Paul liked being a girl dad,
Yeah.
and he made that be known. And and we'll get into a little bit about your message and how you share it on your Instagram, which is amazing. So it's hard for me to even talk about it. You lived it, so it's your story. So on Friday, July 15th, Paul goes out for some exercise, and he was, you mentioned before, I got to tell you, as an offensive, I'm not an offensive lineman. Paul was an offensive lineman. He was a big guy, like you said, but the photos and the videos that I saw of Paul he was trim and fit. He wasn't the 300-pound offensive lineman. So he had really transformed his body, looked more like I would say a basketball power forward kind of. Is that an accurate kind of?
Sure, tight end, a lot of people would say too.
Okay, there you go.
Paul played for sort of a cup of coffee, as he would say, in the NFL for the Broncos, and then for a variety of reasons, most of really, to speak for him, just authentically wanted to sort of start our life and not be, it's just sort of about questions on month to month, what would be happening with a football career. So he decided to pursue a more, I guess, traditional business career, and so started working with the Walsh Group. But you sort of see these two trajectories sometimes that former, especially elite level football players take, where they just sort of lean into being the big guy, and Paul definitely took the other extreme and was very, very active, very fit. In the year prior to passing away, he ran 2 marathons, one right at 4 hours. So he was definitely very good shape.
Yeah, his athletic prowess carried from basketball, football, over to distance running. Yeah. That's amazing. So he goes out for his run, and then the next day he was called to heaven. And this is beautiful, and I borrowed this from a good friend who lost both her husband and her son, and she says brutal.
Yep.
It's brutal and beautiful all at the same time. But so you have to tell the girls that Paul's passed, and kind of if you could share that story, which again is beautiful and painful all at the same time.
For sure. Yeah. So exactly as you said, Bill, Paul went out for a run. Our younger daughter was with him. I happened to be on a conference call. Paul's sister at the time was actually working on a project with me, so she was on the call. So a lot of things that, again, made communication happen quickly when I got the call from the police. But all of what you say, the part sort of the story that leads up to it is that it was close to our house within our neighborhood. I went down, ambulances, police cars, fire trucks, obviously was, wanted to get to Sloan. And then as soon as I saw the way the police officer looked at me, I just had this immediate, shield of the Holy Spirit. It's the only way to describe it, that I knew our life was never going to be the same. And it just was this immense sort of feeling of protection and strength, and also just this true reality that now in, a lot of reflection and talking about it, a lot of other people that were involved or, within the next 24 hours came to know what happened, but didn't have that experience. So I really had this pivotal moment of our life will never be the same, I shouldn't say verses, but others that were holding on to this, everything can be okay type of hope. So the day proceeds to happen, the way that sort of brutal sort of blessing. One of my very, very best friends in the world is an interventional cardiologist, and he was able to, again, sort of from the first minute that he spoke to the doctors and he knew and said, this isn't, it just was, everyone was able to communicate in a way that I knew what the reality was. even though we weren't officially told for another day. So all that to say, the girls were with their cousins, and someone said to me in the course of those sort of 6 hours on Friday, I would hate to, when it was evident what was sort of to come, someone said to me, I would hate to have known that on the day my dad died, I was like having a really fun day. And it just sort of stuck to me. And I said, you know what, I should see the girls. So I had the girls brought back to our house, only about 10 minutes from the hospital, went home, and had just been praying and just looking for clarity on what to say. Obviously, they're extremely young, obviously experience that, frankly, no one had been through that's in my network or circle, or obviously at that point, just close family and friends that were even part of it. And I had the girls come inside and said to them, and they're now I even look at them like, oh my gosh, they were so tiny at that point, and said that we don't know if dad's brain's going to start working again. And so there was 2 questions basically I wanted to know from them. Did they want to see him? Because at that point, that could have had an implication. It didn't end up into the organ donation possibilities. And then just basically let him know that we'll find out tomorrow if his brain will start working again. And they cried. Obviously, I was crying. And then they just sort of said, well, let's just go make some macaroni and cheese. And we have a sort of tradition in our house, which we still do, of having sort of playlists and songs that we play. And so Dylan said, my older daughter, we should play the morning playlist and the song that Daddy just added. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because it's more like my style to add songs to a playlist. And I was like, I don't think Dad added a song to the morning playlist. And she's like, he did. And so I said, there's no Alexa in this room. I said, Alexa, play the morning playlist. And I Can Only Imagine by Mercy Me started playing. And it's truly, I still get chills, right? It was like the most evident, palpable feeling of Paul's on his way to heaven and he's here and wants us to know. And my sister, 2 of my sisters-in-law were in the house at the time. And so they were able to experience it with us. And it was, it's just one of those, you just
So
can't
powerful.
explain it.
Well, and for Dylan to have the presence of mind in the light of that circumstance to ask to hear that song and the title of it and the lyrics, my gosh, it's a painful moment. And Ellen and I, there's no other word for it. It's a tragedy.
Yeah.
It is. But you have, like you said, with the power of the Holy Spirit and the protection of that, you have decided that you're going to help others. And how did that all come about? Like, you're grieving the loss of your husband, you're raising 2 young children, and how did you lean into your faith and find the strength to do that?
Yeah. So a few things on it. Part of the sort of the social media sharing was very organic. It was sort of natural for me in general I like to share, just stuff on social media or family, etc. And then the story of Paul's passing did get some national media coverage. I always like to say that he would have said, man, it was in a slow news week if I was on national news. But he was, for a variety of reasons, the way I have family that works in media, so they always try to explain how it probably got picked up. But his story got picked up. It was on ABC, even evening news, people.com, things like that. In a lot of those, in things like People, it referenced I had, sort of just shared to my, at that point, sort of close network of family and friends that Paul had passed. And so sort of organic, Bill. And then I just really, I always say it's not that there's no thought that goes into it, because there's obviously thought, but it's really just what naturally is on my mind, is in the process that the things I've experienced, and just have chosen to keep sharing. It's been really powerful to recognize in a brutal way that, everyone experiences loss. I would say I had no idea how many widows and widowers in their 30s and 40s there are out there, that every day it's just, I think it's being able to, wherever anyone is in a loss journey, or whether they're close into it or friends of somebody that's lost a partner or spouse, that it's helpful to me to share, and then it's, helpful to know it's helpful to other people.
Is it, so you said that it is helpful to you. Is it, so in a way, and I'm not a therapist, but is it therapeutic in a way
It's sure.
to
Yep.
share that? Okay.
Putting it out in a
That's
different, I go to therapy all the time. Obviously I have close family and friends I talk to about things, but it is, it just a different sort of method of sharing that's helpful for me.
Good.
Okay.
And I would think, and I can't even put myself in your shoes, but I would think that the love that you and Paul had and the love that he had for you and the girls is kind of the foundation of this. And I guess you just have to trust God's plan. Is that kind of how you go day to day?
Yeah. I always say I don't like to think that Paul passing away was in God's plan, but obviously we're in an earthly world, so we don't know exactly. But I am confident in, there's so many. I was just saying that this week to somebody about, I was like, I don't know why Paul and I would have ever had this conversation when the girls were 2 and 4 about whatever it was. But we really had this beautiful foundation of a relationship, and had I love planning and vision setting and all those types of things. And so we'd had a lot of conversations about what would our family look like 5 years, 10 years, like what did we want to do? Where would we want to retire? What kind of trips would we want to take? One small example is in the summer of 23, we had planned, so that would have been this past summer, to live in London for a month. Didn't do it, obviously, it was sort of within year 1 of everything happening, but the girls and I are going this summer. And so just things
great.
that, again, I know, with the most confidence that Paul wants us to continue living, and it's going to be different, and it is different, but he would be very mad at me if I was, not being myself and not doing the stuff that he loved about me and those types of things. So that's
I don't think he could ever be mad with you. I don't think he could ever be mad with you.
Yeah.
But I do. So when you have, like you said, like when you have the life that might have been versus the life you're living now, that how do you what does your family, what do your family mean now? What does your extended family mean? How do your friends support you? What does that look like?
There's a few things I think that come to mind. One is that I think the girls deserve a family, and to not have it and so even things that at first were even hard for me but we are a family. We're not just the three, is really doing as much as I can to set them up with the life experience and that we can't change what's happened and we can't bring Paul back, but what can we do to still have them be, experience the best life they can experience. I'd say it changes all the time. I try to be, transparent and of what I need from people, what's helpful, what's not helpful. But a lot of it, we're 21 months in, that we just don't know what we don't know at any given time, and so it's also having the right people sort of in your day-to-day court that can just meet you where you are and be open to it. And which I've been blessed to really have the right, wonderful family, but also some very, very close friends that are there for me always.
Well, that's good to know, because oftentimes people can be experts on others' lives. And I'm sure when you go through a tragedy like this, others may not be as respectful or diplomatic in their, voicing of opinions. It sounds like that's not the case for you, which is
which
great.
Has been, truly has not been something I've had to really deal with, which has been great. And even in choosing to sort of share our lives, parts of our lives publicly, similar, there's very people are always like, oh my gosh, you must get so many comments, and it's like, knock on wood to a certain degree, but it's just been a very positive experience.
Good. Well, I think one of the things and that I think this is a testimony to your love and for Paul and the family was what Sloan said. I think it was Sloan where she was she praying, or how did this happen where she talked about the family, and it was Frankie, your dog, Dylan, her sister, you, mom, dad, and Jesus.
Right.
I mean, how does a 5 or 6 year old come up with that? Well, it's because of you and Paul.
Yeah. No, the girls have very true, I talk about this a lot, just sort of these beautiful faiths, actually fairly different. Even Paul and I's faith life was different as well in terms of what we outwardly practiced and things like that. But the girls are so, in such a beautiful way, black and white on Dad's in heaven. And there's no question on it. I'd say, anything where I do am sort of sometimes proactively more protective is if they are going to therapy or teachers or things like that. It's just making sure we're all on the same page. No one can argue with them about where Dad is and what that is. Sloan, they're just so, I guess, just direct and black and white that Dad's with Jesus. My grandmother, they call it Great Nana, so they had the St. Mary's grad opportunity to meet a few times before she passed away a year before Paul, and they're very black and white about Dad hanging out with Great Nana. Dylan just had her first reconciliation about a month ago, and she goes, "Do you think Dad and Great Nana Dad grabbed her and said, 'Let's get some popcorn and watch Dylan'?" And so they're just so, he's beautifully present in our lives is the best way to say it. Sloan speaks about him in the present tense. It catches people off guard a lot, honestly, like where they just, there's no question that he's in heaven, but also witnessing our life on earth.
Didn't one of the girls explain to you what she wanted her children to call Paul?
Yep. And just very, if you had heard the conversation, like if someone had overheard it, they would have just by no means thought that Sloan's dad is in heaven. Like she just said, "Oh, and like when I have kids, they're going to call you," I forget what she even told me they were going to call me, "and then Dad, Grandpa." But it wasn't even, it's just so obvious to her that of course her kids are going to call Dad.
Right.
He's going to be a part of our lives. And is that just, stuff that it's, definitely, painful, but beautiful.
Yeah. How did, and again, if you're willing to share this, but what kind of daily practices do you employ to kind of help you each day and do what you're doing?
Yeah, so a lot.
When you're running a business, you're a parent.
Yeah, definitely a lot going on, which helps me also just keep going in general. So again, so thankful. I had have always grown up with a strong faith, grew up in the Catholic Church, had a pretty substantial sort of faith formation in both high school and college. I've just been really active in a lot of different ministries, and developed, I'd say, a pretty, just a commitment to prayer, I guess maybe the best way to say it. And so having that foundation and already being sort of part of our lives was again great, because it's not like it just has continued to have deeper meaning or different meaning in this chapter. But man, I guess to answer your question, it's constant sort of conversation of prayer with whoever is deciding to speak to at that point. And then there's a few devotionals that I'm pretty consistent with that are just helpful to sort of like reframe and reset at different times. And then obviously the practice of going to Mass. My parents go to daily Mass, so sometimes try to join them, it's like a lot of a continuation. It's just like I sort of have this quote that I use all the time that everything's the same, but everything's different. And that's a lot of it as well.
Do you still talk to Paul?
All the time, for sure.
All the time.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I know a lot of our, it's always not fun, but family and friends that will tell me different things, or even sometimes where people that especially knew us together well, and the sort of love, but also, eye rolls he would have with me sometimes of my antics that people are like, "Oh my gosh, Paul's for sure. I can talk to him right now, rolling his eyes at you."
I'm sure he is. That's what I was worried about.
Yeah.
But anyway, so do you see Paul and the girls?
Oh my gosh, yes. I do. There's mannerisms. Yes. They're they are they're both obviously beautiful, strong girls, and I will definitely see him always, and will always answer questions because Paul is 6'7", I'm 5'6", and the girls are definitely going to will have his height, and so that's the other thing. I always like three of us walking around one day and be like, where did this height come from? So he's alive and well in our lives, but
Yes.
definitely within the girls as well.
Yeah. Well, they're going to be taller than you,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Before I know it.
Oh, yeah. You posted that the other day, and it was like, good Lord, they are almost,
They are.
not quite eye to eye, but that's great. Well, oh gosh. Well, and I know that, and we've talked, and I've followed you on Instagram, and I've tried to learn as much as I can. But one of the things that I've noticed is, and you and Paul were blessed that in the sense of you didn't take any moment for granted. And I think you alluded to that when you were out for margaritas a couple nights before, and you cherished all of those moments. And what advice can you give to others, like, that are kind of just going through the day, marking time?
Yeah, no, definitely. I was going to say that there's this, I talk a lot about sort of this commitment to living, and it's not just because of everything that happened, because we had that before. It was just this truly, sort of unique part of Paul, especially I'd say when we sort of hit our stride, and as we became parents and in careers, is that like we shouldn't be waiting for certain things. He loved to enjoy life, loved to, attend highly friends and family. At one point, I was like, we probably should figure out how many rounds of golf he played in 12 months before he passed. He never said no to a round of golf. He never said no to, if I, had time to go out to lunch, and so, I think what I always is just to, not even the cliche of like, you never know what can happen tomorrow, but more just enjoy who you're with, what you're doing. If you have the ability to do that in your work, in your, friends, family. I've become even continuing to learn that Paul actually had been pushing me even right around the time when he passed away, of just being more purposeful with friendships, and, you don't need to be spending time with everybody, be a little bit more, let's spend time with the people that are really filling our cup or filling their cups. So yeah, just trying to continue that. And then what I try to always remind myself of is this commitment to living here. Like we can't go back. We can't change anything. So, but with the life we have now, let's do the best we can.
Well, I noticed that one of the things that you are very intentional about, and Matt was one of his core, was being present with others.
Sure.
And you're so giving of your time and of your energy that I can see that in your life. But what choices, you kind of wrote about this in your posts, do you make each day?
Right.
Like you choose to be happy, you choose to be grateful, you choose to be loving. How did you draw strength to do that?
For sure, faith is where the strength comes from. And also that I just can't imagine doing it the other choices. Like I just, part of it is just sort of who I am, obviously with Paul's influence and partnership for so long, but I just, for myself, and then especially for the girls, Paul had a thing that sort of, he had a saying he loved, I talk about this in his eulogy, that you either get better or worse, you never stay the same. And he would have things that he would say that are like a classic Paul Duncan quote is, when we were in college, most people were wearing sweatpants, and he was like, it takes the same effort to put on a pair of jeans as it does to put on a pair of sweatpants. Like, why do people just put on a pair of jeans and get going for the day? And so just wanting to, continue that, making the choices to get better versus, worse. Obviously, when people are in grief and sadness, doesn't mean there is time to grieve, and you should grieve, and everyone still grieves forever. But I just can't imagine not choosing that, especially for myself, but then to set the best example for the girls.
Well, and I think you said that best in one of your messages, and I'll try to quote it here, where you were striving to live a life of love and light with your daughters. Each day is hard, but each day is beautiful. And I think that's true, and that's what you're doing. So again, I'm not a professional, you're not a professional, but you're living it. So what advice do you have for families that have suffered loss?
I think it's a few things come to mind. One is that to not run from it or try to, work around it. One thing I continue to learn and try to do is that when you're I sort of had this thing I've talked about recently with somebody like that, we're always going to feel sad. Like there's always going to be a void of Paul. And so it's like, in times where I've tried to say, oh, well, that'll go away, or it's easy. I think it's better just to sort of like work through it and accept the hard and work through the hard. The other things I would say that is to keep, like I said, it's keeping them alive in the way that it makes sense and is best for you and your family. But this is something people say, but it never hurts reiterating, like, say their name, talk about them, talk about the stuff that made you laugh, talk about their human stuff that they're also not. I always say Paul would not want to be this like perfect thing. He was like, and remember like that, like we all have, we joke that Sloan talks way too much about his farting that needs to be remembered, but that's her like favorite thing to talk about. But it's like just keep their memories alive, and because that helps so much than feeling like you're, trying to put something in a box and put it on a shelf.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that about the humanness of it, and because we have I didn't lose a spouse, but I did lose a brother, and we tend to be very reverent of them, and I kind of have to take a step back and, well, you knew who Paul was better than anybody in the world, and I knew who Matt was, so you just kind of take it for what it's worth. But that makes it fun and makes it real too, and you're being true to them. So I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm sure Dylan and Sloan are going to be getting off. Do they take the bus, or do they?
They go to after school, but they'll be
okay. Okay,
a little bit.
Yeah. So, but kind of, we're getting close to the end of our time. But is there anything else you want to share about Paul or your journey for the listeners?
No, I appreciate it. No, it's been so good to have this conversation. I think for any of the listeners here, that whether you've experienced loss or people is that you still sort of talk about have the choice to do your best to find the pause, find the light in what's there. It doesn't mean that some days are 99% dark, but that this person left a positive impact on you, on your life, on the world, and then the most that you can do to sort of bring that forward and continue to. The other part is to find what that next version of yourself is. So much of myself is the same, but so much is completely different. And that's been another sort of really helpful recognition. And for myself is that I am forever completely changed, having gone through this experience and not having Paul by my side here. And that like, it's okay to be a different person. It's okay that your friendships might change a little bit. The way you parent definitely changes, the way that how you show up, what you prioritize, all those things. And it's sort of like leaning into that this is this next chapter of life for you that you didn't want or would never have asked for, but that not trying to make yourself feel like you have to be the same person you were before.
That's great. That's beautiful. And I know you're doing it. Ellen, I can't thank you enough for chatting with us today and for being an inspiration to all the families and that follow you on Instagram and that follow your message of love and hope and your journey. Matt was called to his heavenly home as Paul was as well, and I know they're up there looking over us, and hopefully they're maybe having some popcorn, like Dylan said, and enjoying each other's friendship. I'm honored to have you as a guest. I always say I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds it, and you are living that for sure. Before we close our show today, I want to encourage our listeners to follow Ellen Duncan, Pineapple Ellen on Instagram. We're going to post that in the show notes. how to, follow that and more information about Ellen. But Matt always reminded us to do 3 things each and every day to live life to the fullest. Find something you're grateful for, regardless of how powerful the storm is. To be present to those you are with. Pay attention to what you're feeding your mind, your body, and your soul. Again, a huge thank you to our guest, Ellen Duncan. To our listeners, remember to subscribe to the show, share it with friends, and comment. With gratitude, Matt listeners, until the next time, find the courage to be grateful. Godspeed, my friends.